everyone, and welcome back to Out of Spite, where the show where LGBT issues are anything but out of mind. I'm one of your broadcasters, Dan. My pronouns are he and him.
I'm Jade, she, her. Oh dear.
Jane. Pronouns are she and her.
I'm Rain, he, him.
And unfortunately, our other broadcaster, Luna, is not here for today's show. That's okay.
They've glitched out of existence.
Yeah, it happens, technology. But for today's show, we will be talking about exclusion within the LGBT community. And would anyone like to start off with their general experience?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
So let's. I'm gonna. So as a trans woman, I have a lot of issues in dedicated lesbian spaces. All of my previous experience has been very, if I and even in a purely digital environment, if I want to enter a discussion and I sound like this, it's immediately a problem.
Hmm.
And people already everyone just kind of I won't say shuns me, but doesn't really want to interact with me as a result.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that notion that because you're a trans woman, you have to do everything you can to kind of mimic a cis woman.
Yeah, that's apparently what they want, and I don't think that's really true for everyone. But it just happens that whatever lesbian centered groups I've found, if it's felt a lot like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I understand that because I felt that in gay spaces, to be honest. As being a trans man and stuff, being accepted in certain gay spaces is just people shun you out. Especially I've noticed if even with feminine gay men or even masculine gay men or whatever, they still shun you out because I've been called misgendered multiple times in gay spaces, especially primarily gay men spaces, because they just don't think I'm actually quote unquote gay enough. And I've noticed in the gay men community, most things usually primarily, especially with romantic relationships or even trying to guide your way through whatever, it's always something. It has to do a lot with what's ever between your legs, and I've noticed that from my own accounts.
Right.
And they've asked, so, oh, surgery, and I'm like, huh, what? So and it's just because of the fact of I'm not there or whatever, and etc. Or I'm not a cis man or whatever and stuff like that. It's automatically shuns me out from being in gay men spaces as well. So yeah.
Right. Which is unfortunate that that sort of thing happens within our community.
Mm-hmm.
As for my own experience, I know I can't say in that sort of way I've been excluded. Another type of exclusion I've been through is just LGBT, especially trans spaces, not being very accessible to me. Um, like I mean, I'm sure some of you may know that I live in New York, so kind of a lot of the LGBT spaces are in Manhattan or in the city area, and I don't live there. I live in the Bronx. I've always lived in Brooklyn,
Ooh, the
Bronx, all that
boogie.
sort of thing. Yeah, I live. So getting from the Bronx to Manhattan is such a hassle, and having to do that every day or every other day to go to a sort of safe space is hard because it's draining. The trip is draining, and then sometimes when I get there, there's activities that I don't necessarily want to do, or my friends aren't there. The people who make me feel safe aren't there. It's just it's a big just. And I guess not to mention a lot of them LGBT spaces are kind of 21 and over, they're bars. There aren't any place for just teens. Now that I'm older, it's not so much of an issue. But when I was younger, there weren't any teen oriented places or kid friendly places other than just maybe the centers.
I
Mm-hmm.
I I told you that it was hard when I was like 7.
It's a little
But
difficult to
I
do.
also right. I also relate a lot to like gay males just feeling kind of like ostracized,
Hmm.
you know, being, a lot of gay spaces, like, even when you're in lesbian spaces, like you said, like, they look at you a certain type of way, or like, femme identified, queer a certain type of way. Your biological, the biological aspect of yourself, whatever you want to call it. But then when you go into a space for like, queer men, it's like you weird, and they're like, "Why the hell are you here?" And you're like, "Well, I had nowhere else to go. Like, what? Like, what do you want me to do?" They're like, "Leave," and they make it very apparent. Um, I don't know. I agree with that.
Yeah. And then that goes into like the fact of like certain spaces do make you feel safer. Like for example, I've never felt comfortable in lesbian spaces,
Right.
in gay men's spaces because they, as Jane said, they ostracize you. And then, but spaces that I have felt safe was like more inclusive spaces, which were like bi and pansexual people were like who were primarily like on the inclusive spectrum of like their sexual orientation, like bisexual people, pansexual people, and like all around queer spaces and stuff. I personally felt safer in because I felt like even when dating as well, like I've always like geared towards dating people who are primarily pansexual or bisexual, or in spaces be it like where people are primarily bisexual or pansexual or ultimately queer, because I feel like they won't look at me in a certain type of connotation, and I would feel like more noticed and also more understood in those certain
Hmm.
spaces as well, because like they
Right.
would be able to understand me more versus, and I noticed in um gay spaces and gay men spaces and primarily lesbian spaces, there's a lot of like sort of ignorance. I'm not saying that ignorance is a bad thing, but they have a tendency to ask questions that should not be asked, and they also have a tendency to just like pin you out in like a corner and stuff where it's just like, oh, you're here, all right. But like in pansexual and bisexual spaces, I've always felt like they don't pin me out, like, you know what I mean, they treat me as an actual person in the community, so yeah.
Yeah.
Um, to add on to that, I'm pretty much just agreeing with you. All of my experiences in bi spaces have been the exact opposite of what I
Ooh.
found in lesbian space. It's just been a lot of, yep, that's who you are. Welcome to the party. It's like, cool, thank you, really appreciate
Right.
that.
Right.
And I'm not. I guess it could just be because like, a lot of bi and pan people like feel the same kind of like exclusion from the greater community sometimes, just because,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, just because like for whatever reason, they're also like ostracized for like not picking a side or whatever, and I guess there's some solidarity in that.
Hmm.
But I hate that it has to be like, oh, just because we are the worst treated in like our alphabet soup, that's why we're okay together. I don't know.
Yeah. It's kind of it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
And like I'll touch more on that later. Um, but it's something that like me and I know a lot of other people like just go through. Yeah. Yeah, just yeah.
That's fair. Um, mm,
So
Yeah, Shay?
how do we how do we feel about like? Well, I mean, I guess this kind of ties into like phobia, like that. We could brush over it a bit in the community, but I feel like when you have these exclusive type of atmosphere, this like phobic type of way, just people in their being, if you're a trans lesbian or you're just a lesbian in a gay space, you know, sometimes sort
Mm.
of like there's some side of like, I don't know, not prejudice, but I don't know really how to describe it. It's like this kind of like weird undertone of like, oh, you don't really belong here, you know? Like this is like the boys club, or like, you know, like
Yeah.
some bro culture like that goes on, that still goes on in straight. It's like even these have this type of like bro culture, you know, atmosphere, and it kind of like reflect it in our community and stuff like that. Like
Right.
we mirror what we've been oppressed by and just do it in a gay way.
Pretty much.
Definitely.
Yeah, and like to like back your point of like femphobia. I feel like part of the issue I don't mesh well with lesbian spaces is because like I'm like not strictly femme, but that's how I prefer to present, and like the the bunch of butch lesbians that I meet are very unhappy with that. It's either like they have an issue with me being trans or an issue with the fact that like, oh, why am I not like like trying to look more butch? And it's like, well, if I do that, then you're going to think I'm a guy. And it's like, well,
Right.
what's this catch-22?
Yeah,
Right.
it's very difficult, complicated. I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, honestly.
Well, just like every good Facebook relationship, it's complicated. The end.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. Boy.
Oh man, I know. Speaking of like women, and just sort of like how, like, yes, I'm trying to make a segue.
Don't worry about it.
So, what are y'all experiences with women's groups that include trans men, and how do you feel about that?
Okay, well, I mean, I can totally 10 out of 10 touch on that. Because of the fact of I used to do this documentary series in the summertime. I used to work on film work, and there was this group that I was doing a film work on, you know, and they are a primarily feminist group. They're a women's group, totally understandable, cool, but you know, they also include non-binary people, and I was let know that one time there was a boy that was included in the group. This boy, he was a cis boy. By the way, if I want to make that apparent.
Right.
So they caught interest in me, and they were like, "Oh, you should really join our group." And I was just like, I was thinking about it. I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, I'll probably be able to express my art, creativity, like my screenwriting, and etc." So, because they also do that, so I was just like, "Okay, cool," you know. But then one of my coworkers went to go to do another shoot.
Right.
So one of the questions that were included in the shoot, because we had to do interviews with the director, she said, they asked her, "Are men allowed in here?" She was like, "No, not at all. Men are not allowed here." And then my friend goes back to tell me, and she's like, "Bro, you do know men are not allowed. Our sort of like person who was leading our filming, shooting, and stuff like that, he was like, yeah, I was told that men are not allowed in the group, but maybe you should just give it a try." And I was just like, my friend was like, "No, because they don't perceive you as who you are. Like, why would they say guys are allowed in one part, but then say men are not allowed at all, and then try to push you inside of that sort of space?" Like, they was really trying so hard to get me in that space, and I was like, "Nah, I'm good. I don't want it." But it was like, "Come on, like, you know, you can do the audition and etc. You know." And they were a pretty heavy feminist group, and I was just like, no, thank you. But they was like trying to push me to go. They're like so hard, and I was like, no, because you kind of told me one thing. Come to find out, it's not that thing. And what are you trying to like perceive it? And my friend was just basically like, "So bro, they're not gonna respect you as how you identify. Just know that." I was like, "Yeah, I know that, and I'm not gonna do it."
Right. It's like they don't see you how you see yourself.
Exactly. and then like try to push this narrative. And like if I were to, I feel like I would be very much so excluded one, and also question as to why my gender identity, and like I just felt like I would be pushed like a sort of narrative that is just like
Or
pushed
like even
on
your
me.
purpose, like
Yeah,
your purpose in
exactly.
the group. Like they'll probably
Exactly.
be like you have to prove yourself or some type of thing, weird like hazing type of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was not about to like deal with that.
As you should.
Right. No, that
It's
shouldn't be
good to
something
know
that.
value in yourself. See, and that's a good lesson. I think a lot of people understand. It's like, even though, let's say, you're given the opportunity, you find that it's like, it's there's nicks and crannies into like why they have you, or if they don't really like see you, you should just
Mhm.
leave. Like, just leave with yourself and all of that, because it's more worth than just devalued and unrecognized.
If they're
Right,
using you
Jane.
as
Like, I don't think any of us could have said it better ourselves.
Exactly.
Are there any other like experiences that people have had with that sort of thing?
yeah. So
I don't know. The most I could relate to that is I was a part of a ballroom house. Like
Hmm.
I I went there, but like everything was about the ballroom house was about flipping and twirling and jumping and voguing and stuff like that. And they weren't like covering like other things like, like specific categories. And if you know like ballroom house, it's like
Yeah.
that the whole ballroom scene. And usually trans women or like femme queen would do like realness or runway. But when I joined the house, they would never cover this. Every single time they would just rehearse their numbers, their flipping and voguing numbers. And it felt
Right.
like, like, why am I even a part of this house if they're not even like considering, mentoring me or teaching me or helping me? Like, it just felt really it just didn't feel at home, if you know what I mean. Like, it just felt like I was excluded. I was like
Not
excluded because either they didn't have the tools to help me and they just wanted, somebody like me to be there, you know, like
Yeah.
just to have you there, or they just didn't know what to do. And I felt that in the room. It just didn't feel good. So I left.
No,
mm,
no, that's fair.
I understand that completely because I was like in a ball, like a house and stuff like that. And like I feel like in ballroom culture they really try to push you in sort of a sort of category. Like let's say if you're a trans woman, you automatically have to do realness. You automatically have to like try to do runway or like
Sex
face.
symbol, sex
Hmm.
Yeah.
siren.
And it's like why does it have to be a thing? And if you're a trans person, like a trans male, you automatically have to be butch something or like,
Yeah.
men realness and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's like you have to prove. I mean, I know why ballroom was made and etc. like that. Right? I know, like so like people, queer folk could feel accepted in society, yada yada, within the community and etc. But it's like in ballroom culture, they really try to push this like you have to be in a certain category for this, for in your house or whatever and stuff like that in order to win and stuff. And it's like me personally, the only category that I mostly could like actually do was face, but like most of the people that were doing face will like be questioning because they'll be like, well, you're not why? Because mostly trans women would do face, um, so they'll be
Mm-hmm.
like, why are you quote unquote here? Because like you identify as male, right? So why are you here doing face? And I'm just like, I can't do anything else. So what do you expect me to do? I mean, I can like do all the jobs, drips, and all that stuff and etc. Because like voguing, I can do that. But like I would like to venture out in other categories. But it's like I don't feel comfortable in doing the other categories because
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
categories are basically you're forced into like this box, to be honest, and it's like
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with forced into some weird box that doesn't. I mean, right, and you hit it on the nail on the head. Like that's literally what it is, though. Like, you know what I mean?
mhm.
Like, that's literally what the ballroom community is categories, boxes, squares, and if you don't fit into any of them hoes, not you're not really you don't really get the niche of it all, you know.
Mhm.
And it's not like their fault, and it's not like our fault at the same time. It's just like maybe certain spaces are just excluded for certain people, and it's not something to, you know, that's why we create our own spaces. We make safe spaces for ourselves and who we find marginalized or not necessarily given light to, or a chance to, you know.
Yeah, and that sort
I,
of like
Oh,
ties
Yeah.
into like how there's like I've noticed like there's when you're talking about spaces, there's certain spaces that are not even included, which I feel bad for the people of the non-binary community. I'm not non-binary myself, but people in the non-binary community are often not. They often don't have a space for themselves,
yeah.
because either you're trans feminine or either you're trans masculine. I've even caught myself being in trans masculine groups and not feeling comfortable because they always have like this sort of like bro like mentality in the group sometimes in spaces. And even in the trans feminine spaces, it's like feminine like strict like femininity type of like toxic
Sis, yes,
Yeah.
toxic
yes, ma'am.
toxic femininity, and then you have toxic masculinity in trans men spaces and stuff where I've also like felt uncomfortable, to be honest. And then what do you call it? And then like for non-binary folk, there's like no spaces because it's like you're either on one side of the you're either on the which is weird because people are like, well, you know, non-binary folk like they choose either one part of the spectrum, like they either choose to be like more masculine or they actually, but it's like no, non-binary
That's not
is like
how it
literally
works.
exactly that's it's literally the lack of gender. So you're making kind of no sense here. So it's like kind of like, you know, some spaces are meant for, you know, certain groups of people, which is perfectly fine. Like, you know, POC groups or like, you know, strictly trans feminine groups, strictly trans masculine groups, which are perfectly fine. You know what I mean? But there should be
Yeah.
more spaces that are very much so inclusive. You know, that it shouldn't only have to be centers, it shouldn't only have to be groups and etc. But it should be like certain places and stuff or like spaces where it's like inclusive towards, you know, all people, or even like a section for at least non-binary people where they can actually feel comfortable in and not prejudged and stuff. So yeah, so and the also like the whole like non-binary folk and stuff, which they get so much bad shit for. It kind of just like ties into like how they get so much like garbage, like being automatically called trenders as well. Like,
Yeah.
anyway,
Pretty much you basically like established the whole point, and taking that, I'd like to actually move into our next point of being like the concept of trans trenders, and how that kind of ties in, like people like
yeah,
believe that a lot of non-binary folk, non-binary people, they're like doing it just for the sake of like, oh, it's trending, being trans is trending and all that sort of stuff.
or like
When
the special little snowflake, like
yeah, like that sort of thing. And it's kind of annoying because it's on the whole like basis of like, oh, to be a trans woman you have to be this. To be a trans man you have to be this.
yeah.
And if you're not within those categories, then you're just a trender. You're doing
you're
it.
not valid, right?
Yeah, you're not valid.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like personally, I've been called a trender like a few times, and like even people's told my current boyfriend to him, right? Oh, your boyfriend or significant other is not even trans. Like he's a whole trender. He wears makeup. He doesn't even bother to pass, and it's like, whoa. The thing is, the person couldn't even say it to me, to my face. That's how like fearful this person is of me, which is weird. But I've
Oh,
been called a trender on multiple occasions, just because I like being androgynous and like makeup and like expressing myself. So like, it sucks because that like language could be also harmful to people and also like make people question themselves severely. I've had a point where I thought that I was a trender, and I was just like, "Whoa, like, am I? Like, am I? Like?" But I realized, like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm. It's not a it's not a phase, mom, or it's not, and it's not something that I just want to do for shits and giggles. It's like my actual identity and my expression. So it's like, yeah.
So Jade, do you have a
I have a small addition, which is just there. Which I guess it was lost in the last episode, but um, there isn't a right way to be trans, right? The whole concept of trenders doesn't work because it's saying, oh, just because you're like you don't care about passing 24/7 means you're not real. That's not the point. Like, trans people exist because we're more comfortable as we want to identify. That's it. It's got nothing else to do with what we're doing with our bodies, how we're presenting. That's up to us.
Ace people and bi people are
That's all.
basically erased, to be honest, and not
Yeah, no,
quote
that's
unquote
very
valid in the community.
Yeah, so let's clear
Yeah.
that up.
For sure. I know basically like my own experience. I'm pansexual, but I'm also asexual. So that's like two for the price of one. Sorry, I have to calm down.
Yeah, take your breath.
Oh man. But it's something that I see a lot of, like, just the fact that people don't want to accept that, oh, you have to like this or another, and it's weird to see that. It's weird to see that it's still something that's going on. And there are people who won't be with like someone who is with the other gender. Like, I know like there are some gay people who won't be with bi men, or there's some lesbians who won't be with bi women, which I mean, I understand, but at the same time, it's like, why?
Yeah. And if you don't mind me jumping in now, because you
Yeah, go for it.
Cool, brilliant. So here's this thing is that's not like you are not the only one. So there was this lovely study in 2019, literally labeled bisexual mental health. If if people who are bi have poorer mental health than like their gay, lesbian, and heterosexual counterparts, and I'll link this study somewhere. You'll see it. I promise it's real. The what it looks like the study found that the majority of bi people with like significant mental health issues are because they keep running into having partners that are not okay with the fact that they're bi, because they're worried about, you know, them running off with someone, or that they're like they're not committed because they can like the other like gender
Yeah.
or whatever. And I'm saying the other, saying like there's one. There's not. I'm using words weird. I promise. Don't want to be inclusive at this point. But yeah, like even the like the prevailing like image that like by people that look like they're in relationships, straight relationships, are like invisible and like they have no problems because they're like het passing. Like that's directly challenged by this study.
Right.
But I also feel I've seen that like within also like community, not only like with only relationships, but like people erase bi people because they think that they're not inclusive of trans people, and then people erase pansexual people because I've seen this before, they call them transphobic, and I'm like, what?
Oh, wait, what?
What?
Yeah, they call pans people transphobic because of the fact of people say that pans people only like date trans people because of the fact of they think they're being inclusive, and then they say that bi people are sort of on the same like don't include trans people, or like also they are sort of transphobic because of the fact that they won't date trans people. It's weird. It's a whole weird conversation that I've seen, and it's like, are you serious right now?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Wow is the right word.
Wow is the only thing I could say.
I don't have a
It's
good.
such a heavy. No, I'd say it's such like a heavy topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that kind of also ties in, I guess, to queer identity. Like, I personally, I don't really label my sexuality, to be honest, but I do label myself as queer because it's like that's my identity, to be honest. I guess that's my sexual identity as well, because of the fact of it's very much so inclusive, and I like the fact of I don't have to be really in a box and stuff. Like I'm just me, and I like people, and I love who I love. And at the end of the day, I still am queer. I'm just me, like, you know, as myself. I'm a queer person, and I just decide to like who I like. And a lot of people have told me like that's not valid because of the fact of it's not an actual sexuality. And I'm like, well, it's mine. It's my identity. But people dislike the fact that it's one, either too inclusive, or two, because it's not an actual box category or actual sexual identity. And I'm like, mm.
I think Jade, you have something to add in.
Oh yes, hello. Sorry. I have three things I'm doing. Right.
Okay.
So just to quickly point it out, and just because I don't want to do the like ace excluding thing while we're in an
Right.
episode about exclusion, haha. So as a quick reminder, so I feel like the that like ace people are like often excluded from spaces, and like there is like a prevailing feeling of like that they don't belong. And like there was this like in 2013, like the creator of the Asexual Awareness Week experienced like significant pushback from like the greater community, being told that like asexuals, quote, should stop trying to pretend they're special, and that also, quote, asexuals are trying to co-opt the movement. Again, completely missing the point of the movement in the first place. It is meant for people who are prejudiced for their like for being asexual or gender minority. That is the point. And if you don't think ace people are a sexual minority, then you are wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that 100%. Because, I mean, I have to gather my thoughts.
Don't worry about it. Take a breath. Think
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it. Do you mind if I answer a question while you're?
Yeah, you can go for it. Go for it. Answer a question.
Cool, thank you. There was a while back, but someone asked like a while back, quote, why be in a lesbian space though? And I'm guessing that was towards some of my points about why I was in them in the first place. Because by definition, I'm a lesbian. I like women. I am a woman. I should be able to be in those spaces. That's it. That's the only reason.
Yes.
Yeah. Got your point?
Oh, going. No, I don't have my point, but I'm going back to like the comments. There was someone mentioning that to quote them, I also feel lesbians also have a hard time being in spaces because lesbians who dress masculine and they would suddenly get mixed in with trans spaces.
I see it.
Yeah. No, like that's completely fair. Like I know lesbians do have like their fair share of like problems within the community.
Yeah. Like we're not. The intention wasn't to ignore lesbians in general. Promise.
Yeah, no, we're mainly talking from our own personal experiences. I'm pretty sure all of the broadcasters here are trans.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or gender not conforming.
Yeah, or gender not conforming. Yes.
Yes.
So that's why, like, if we do seem like we're focusing more on like trans and gender non-conforming, like sort of like topics and opinions, it's because that's basically who we are.
Yeah. It's easier to speak from experience.
Yeah, it very much is.
Is there anything else in here that I wanna touch?
Oh, I was remembering my like sort of ace thing. I know that a lot of people just think that ace people don't exist, which is weird because, and it feels like people always think like, because like I don't feel sexual attraction that I can't make like I can't be intimate, or like there's things that I just can't do, which is not true. It's different for every ace person. Just because an ace person is intimate in a sexual way does not mean that they're not ace. I know. Oh man, there's a way that there's something I cannot remember. I just remember there's a way to like explain it. Somebody explained it so well. I'm very bad at explaining things.
It's alright.
It's okay. It's okay. But like, yeah, just know that there are ace people who do stuff. We gotta wrap up. Okay. Yeah.
Alright, wrap up.
Yeah. Wrap up
Jane,
time.
it's your time.
Jane, you've written your return.
Thank you for joining us. Out of Spite. Find it. Out Spite on Twitter. Out of Spite official. Thank you for this one episode. Have
Oh wait, real quick, we're also on Spotify now. Just saying. That's all.
We are on Spotify.
Okay, bye.
oh.
Bye.